Hi, I want to talk through with you very quickly some pattern pieces for this waxed tote bag. So let's start with the waxed fabric. So I've cut out all my pattern pieces. The plan is to have a zipper pocket along the front here. So I've got a toning zip. I just need to cut out two little bits of waxed canvas to go on each end of that. I haven't done that, but that's just two 1.5 inch squares, 4 1.5 inch squares. I'll put the pattern pieces in the description below, or a link to the blog post which will have all the pieces in. So that's the bottom of the bag, side of the bag, side of the bag. And there's a front pocket. It's going to go along here too. This is going to have a cap rivet at each edge and in the middle, and we're going to stitch down here to create two slip pockets, and then the zipper pocket at the front. So that's the waxed canvas. Then the lining. So you need a lining piece for your zipper pocket on the front here. So that's my lining for that. Then obviously you need your sides, front and back, and your base. Now with these I have applied fusible fleece all round except on the base where I've used Decaville. Then there's a slip pocket to go, so that's my slip pocket piece. I've got a zipper for closing the bag, so that end will be enclosed in here, which will make the zipper closure. You're also going to need webbing for your strap, a slider, and 2 D-rings or a rectangle. So I'm going to start with making the external bag. The very first thing I'm going to do is load my sewing machine with denim thread. I have tested my sewing machine with this waxed canvas, so that's really worth doing. You need to check your presser foot, Teflon foot, regular sewing machine foot if you've got those options, and see which gives you the best tension and stitching. I found my regular sewing machine was the best, and I am going to swap up to a denim thread. So I'm going to top stitch along here to start with and get this pocket made to the front piece of the bag. So the larger of your two front bag pieces, this is going to be the base of the front. So now you've top stitched along here, this is your front pocket where the piece was folded in half. I'm going to lay it over the top and we're going to mark the centre. Now, marking canvas. I'm going to do that by scoring it with this screwdriver. So I'm going to find the centre, which is 6 3/4. Here we go. Quilter's ruler is ever so useful, as you can see. Make sure you get your right angles. So there we go, there's my stitch line. And I'm going to use clover clips to hold the fabric in place. So obviously any pin pricks are going to show on the waxed canvas. So I'm going to back stitch at the top here, sew down here to divide my pocket in half, and then I am going to baste these edges in place. So now you've stitched your pocket in half and top stitched around the edges, we're going to put in a cap rivet here. So I've got a hole punch. Put that on the smallest setting. Let's hope that that's gone through. some of their layers. Let's go again. There we go, I believe we're through now. So let me find a cap rivet. Because my hardware's silver, I'm going to use silver cap rivets. So place it through onto the other side. Could have done with a smaller one, not as thick really. Pop it on. And I'm going to give that a whack with a hammer. So the next step is to put some tabs on the end of the zipper, and then we can sew our zipper in position between the two panels for the front of the bag. So I'm going to use a 1.5 inch square, place them either side of the zipper and clover clip in place. I'm going to machine stitch along the edge here and then flip over and repeat for the other side. So you can see here how I stitch between the two and I can flip over. Let's repeat. With this one, you want to make sure you keep your two pieces of zip close together, because I've just pulled the zipper pull out of the way. So there's our zipper ready. Think about which direction you want the zip to go in. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Once you've decided on the position of your zipper, whether your zipper pull is going to be to the right or to the left, place a little bit of fabric tack along the edge here. You're just going to hold your zipper in place. To machine stitch it. So allow that to dry. And then we're going to get our lining for the pocket. Right, so let's take the piece that is 13.5 by 7.5 and lay it across. Now I could also glue this down, but I think no, I am going to glue it down. You could use your clover clips, or you could tack if you don't have hand tacking, if you don't have fabric tack to hand. So I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry, and then I'm going to change my foot to a zipper foot, and I'm going to stitch all the way along the zipper. All the way along. And then that will hold the lining in place. I am going to move my zipper pull out of the way to start with. Alright, I'm just lifting my foot with the needle in and putting my zipper pull back the other side of the zipper foot. This is a bit of a wriggle, but it gives me a much straighter stitching line. So I stitched along. I'm going to flip my fabric. Give this a good tug. And pull my fabric out of the way. Just check my zip pulls nicely. It does. Right, so we're going to repeat that for the second side. So fabric tack. That's one side, and then I'm going to fabric tack this side as well. This lining fabric is our bed sheet. There we go. Right, let that dry, and then I'm going to machine stitch that. So once you've stitched along here, fold back your waxed canvas and press it, finger press it away from the zip. On the wrong side, we are going to sew together the two pieces of the pocket lining along the edge here. Then once we've done that, we're going to base stitch the pocket to the side panels. Then set aside to make the recess zipper. Fold your fabric in half. You've got two pieces and your edges in just a little. That's about 1/4 of an inch. And we're going to fold back the edge of the zipper here and then encase it as so. So let's fold back the zipper first. So I've just used a little bit of hand stitching to fold back the zipper there. Right, we're going to enclose the zipper. First of all, I'm just going to turn in these corners. And I'm holding that with the fabric tack glue we used earlier. Right. If you don't have fabric tack glue, you can use pins and tack, which until today is how I've always done it. Having discovered fabric tack, I'm a great fan. So I'm aligning my edge of my zipper with the edge that I've pressed in already on the fabric. Right, now I'm going to fold up. This is where your ironed marks really help. I'm just holding that glue in place. I'm going to repeat for the other side. I think I am going to hand tack this here, it's not catching. So I'm going to machine stitch that in place and then I'm going to repeat for the second side. To make the pocket, fold your pocket fabric in half and stitch the long side seams. Trim the corners by your folded bottom, which is going to become your top in a sec. Turn your pocket the right side out. So give it a good press, then fold in your raw edge and press that into nice and flat. This is going to be the bottom of your pocket. Place your pocket onto a piece of your lining fabric centrally, 3 3/4 inches up from the bottom of your bag. I've got the pressed in raw edges at the bottom. I'm going to pin that in place. So you're going to back stitch here, down the side, along the bottom, back up and back stitch here because this will be a pressure point for the pocket. Place your recessed zipper 2 inches down from the top of one of your lining pieces. Obviously make sure you're at the top of the lining piece and your pocket opens facing your zipper. So you're going to pin it on so the right side of the zipper is facing you. As I say, 2 inches from the top, centrally. And then you're going to top stitch this in place, back stitching at each end. Now get your other piece of your bag lining and place it on the other side, again 2 inches from the top. As you can see, a quilter's ruler is really helpful for making sure you've got a parallel line there. So I'm going to pin that in place and equally top stitch that to secure. So now we're going to add the sides of the lining of the bag. We're going to pull the recess zipper out of the way and line up the long edges of the side of the bag. I'm going to pin that in place. And then we're going to machine stitch this side panel along this seam here. And then when we've done that, we're going to do the other side. Open your zip, then pull the other side of the lining to the other side of the side panel, pin that, then you're going to machine stitch that just like you did just a minute ago. Next up is inserting the base of the bag lining. I'm pinning the short edge here. I'm going to stitch that. It helps if you stop just short of your seam allowance on each seam when you're sewing along the bottom of a bag. Just makes it that much easier. I'm back stitching at each end of the seam because obviously this is a potentially weak point. Right, so I've got it attached to the side. Now I'm going to attach it along the base along one side. Pin that in place and machine stitch that. I'm going to just pull the side panels out of the way. I don't want to catch any of the rest of the lining by accident. If you remember, I got the base of the bag with Decaville on the bottom of it to give it strength. Right, so that's one side of the bag base done. Now we're going to do the second side. I'm just going to pin this in place and machine stitch that. As you can see, the bag lining is really coming together now. So now we're going to put on the second side panel. I'm opening out the zip. It just makes it so much easier. I think it's really helpful for you to see how this comes together, how it creates a form. Hence I'm showing you every bit, including the stitching. So I'm attaching the side panel to the base of the lining first. Right, now that's done, we can do the side seams. Again, I'm just keeping the recess zipper out of the way so I don't accidentally catch it in the seam allowance. You might find it a little bit bulky at the corners. You might need to use a bulky seam aid gadget. I've got a video about that in there, and sewing denim. So do check out my sewing denim video if you're struggling with bulk. Right, the last seam to go to finish the bag lining. So this is the side again. Here we go. I always back stitch at the top of the bag, because that's really helpful when you come to then putting your lining and your main bag together, that those seams don't start coming apart at the top. Right, just trim off all my ends. You can see the recessed zipper there and how it works. There you can see my stitching from my pocket, my slip pocket. One finished lining for the bag. Next we're going to create our adjustable bag strap, and we're going to attach this to the sides of our main bag. I'm cutting 2 5-inch stretches of webbing, and we're going to add these to the side panels for the outer bag before we sew the outer bag up. Just make it that much easier. So here's one of my side panels and a D-ring. I'm just threading that through, creating a loop. So I'm just going to fold that in. And then I'm going to place it so the top of the webbing is 2 inches from the top or the side of the bag. Got to allow yourself a turning gap seam allowance. Got to allow yourself a seam allowance. So when you join the outer bag and the inner bag together, you need to be able to sew along the top without the webbing getting in the way. So pin that in place. We're going to sew a rectangle and then diagonally across just to give it strength. So that's the finished rectangle. Next we're going to sew the main bag together. So you've got your front that we did earlier and your side panel. We're going to use clover clips, remember, because holes from pins in waxed canvas are not great. So I'm going to clover clip the sides. I mean, you could use paper clips. If you don't have clover clips, appreciate they're expensive, but they're worth it, I have to say. And I'm just going to clip on the other side whilst I'm at it. So once they're attached, let's sew them. Remember to stop at your seam allowance at the base of the bag, because that'll just make putting the base in easier. Right, now you've done that, we're going to add in cap rivets just to finish those front pockets off. I just think it adds a little bit of a touch of class to them. So hole punch through, insert your cap rivet. I'm going to do that both sides, and then we'll give it a good whack with a hammer. I found it easier to roll the sides to be able to get the hole punch through. This is a leather hole punch. Right, so don't forget to give that a bang with a hammer. I haven't videoed that bit. There we go, now I'm through. Then in goes the cap rivet. So now we've done that, we're going to put the base of the bag in place. Line up the long seam along the base of the bag, clip it and stitch up to your side seams. Actually, I switched back to denim thread for this. I used a standard cotton thread for the lining, but for this I've got my denim thread back in on the machine. So next up we're going to clip the short edges of the base of the bag and the side panel together and stitch those. Stopping at the seam allowance. I'm going to fold the rest of the bag out of the way. I am back stitching at the end of each seam just to add strength. It's a bit bulky because of the wax canvas, so I'm using this wonderful gadget which just helps you machine. I've got a video on how to use one which I'll link. And then also the other side. Right, so now we need to attach the back of the bag. Just cut off my loose threads. I'm just going to follow a very similar process here. So let's get that stitched. So now we've done the side, we're going to do the base of the bag. Stitch that in situ. Right into the corner, as far as you can get, well, to your seam allowance, back stitch. Right, last side seam, here we come. Just clipping that into situ. Let's stitch that. And then we're going to have our outer bag made, and I'll show you how to assemble the lining and the outer bag together. Turn your outer bag inside out, right side out, apologies. Your wax canvas is going to get the odd crease mark, but I just think it makes it look more used. Obviously you could lightly heat it with a protective cloth between you and your iron to get those crinkles out if you like, but I like the crinkles, it makes it look more used. Make sure you get your corners nicely pushed out. Right, so there's my outer bag, right side's out. Now we're going to put the lining over it. I'm just going to unzip the recessed zipper and we're going to fit it over the top so that the right side of your lining is facing the right side of your outer bag. We're going to push it right in as close as we can at those corners. The snugger the better. Now match up your side seams and then clip all round. We're not going to stitch all round, but you need to clip all round just to make sure it fits correctly. If it doesn't, you can adjust one of your side seams just a fraction, just so that it does fit correctly. Just depends upon how precise a sewer you are with your seam allowance. I normally have to make the odd adjustment, to be honest, but on this bag it just fitted perfectly when I sewed it together. Right, so I'm going to stitch all round bar one long side, which is going to be my turning gap, and I'm going to leave that on the back of the bag just because it's not as obvious. So you're going to go nice and steady because you're going to have some bulk at the seams. You might want to press your seam allowances so that outwards to make it easier to go over at the sides. And you're just going to work your way steadily around the bag, moving your fabric as you need to. Don't rush because this seam needs to be straight. This is the top of your bag. With it being canvas, it's quite heavy fabric, and you might need to coax it round on your machine. My machine's quite light, so that means it can move across the table rather than the fabric moving. But it is just a regular domestic sewing machine that is sewing this wax canvas. It can be done. Right, so I've sewn about an inch in and started an inch in on the back of the bag. A little bit of back stitching. Right, here we go. So now to turn it the right side out, you're going to pull it through that turning gap you just created. Once you've pushed it all the way through, fold in your turning gap so you've got a nice crisp edge at the top with your raw edges folded in. My apologies, I didn't video this bit. And you're going to pin it all around with your clover clips, ready to top stitch. Slowly top stitch round your bag, finishing off the raw edge and the overall finish of your bag. It gives it that professional touch. Stitch in your threads. And then the last thing we've got to do is make the adjustable strap. So I zigzagged the raw edges on my webbing on each end. I'm going to thread it through a slider, fold over and sew a rectangle to hold that in place. It's much stronger if you do diagonally stitch across as well. So that's the beginning of the adjustable strap. So the other end, I'm going to thread through our D-ring, and then through the slider. So that's one end on, and then back to the other side of the bag, thread through the D-ring, fold, and then we're going to stitch that in place too, again with a rectangle and diagonal stitches. So that's it, one finished bag with a recessed zipper, adjustable shoulder strap and several pockets. I hope you like it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel.